What's going on, everybody? It's Charles. Today I'm going to walk you through the very basics of using the VCDS scan tool. Today we're going to be using my 2019 Mark 7.5 Golf R, and I'm going to walk you through step by step the very most basic stuff. We're going to talk about address words, measured value blocks, adaptations, basic settings, and a handful of other things. Now, if you're a VCDS or VAGCOM, as some of us used to call it, expert, you probably know most of this. However, I really recommend hanging out and watching this video because if you can pick up one little tip to make your job or your life as a DIYer easier, it's going to be well worth it. Now, to be clear, this is not a sponsored video. This is just a tool that I've used since 2005. I find it to be one of the best VW Audi scan tools out there. Now, at this point in time, the software is free. You just buy the cable from VCDS. I'll be sure to link that down in the description. They have a couple of different options for you guys, depending on what your needs are. So with that said, let's dive into the scan tool, and I'll show you how it works. First, let's go ahead and start by opening up our VCDS. Right now, we're on 19.6.1. You always want to make sure that your VCDS is as up to date as it possibly can be. Here on our main screen, we have a couple of options. Select Control Module, Auto Scan, Service Reminder Interval Reset, OBD2 functions, applications, and our programming options. We can also click the About and learn a little bit more about Rostec. Now, we're going to be working with the key on, engine off today. You can use this with the key on, engine running, but since we're in the garage, we clearly don't want to do that. If you're going to be key on, engine off, you want to get a battery maintainer on it so that we don't kill the battery. Before going into any of the options on this main screen here, let's turn the ignition on and everything else off. So radio, air conditioning, lights, turn it all off. We don't want to have any more loads on the system than we absolutely have to have. Now, depending on what year your car is going to depend on what we're going to do next. While we can auto scan pretty much any car, the ones that are not CAN bus cars, so about 2005 and older, take forever. If you have a newer car than that, then let's use the auto scan with the gateway installation list. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on auto scan. Because we have a CAN bus car, it should auto detect what kind of car it is. If we don't, we can click from the drop-down menu. Remember, this is a worldwide tool, so there may be some things that we don't have here in the US listed. So here's our main screen. We have a couple of options. We can click Start. That's going to interrogate every module and give us the codes and allow us to either save or print that. That's a great way to do it. But what I almost always do first is I click the gateway installation list. This is going to just give me a snapshot of all the modules that may or may not have any codes. And it's super fast, so it's a really quick look into what the car is seeing. So here we go. Here's our gateway installation list. We can see that no modules are listed in red, which is good. That means we don't have any fault codes. If we had a fault code, the module would be highlighted in red. These are all the modules that the gateway knows that the car has installed in it. The numbers here on the left are called address words. Each system has an address word. So the ECM is going to always be address word 01. The transmission computer, whether it's a DSG or whether it's a regular automatic, is always going to be 2. The ABS module is always going to be 3. The instrument cluster is probably always going to be 17. And these are listed right here to the side. If we were to go back and go to select control module, we can identify that control module based on that number. So we see here 01 engine, 02 trans, 03 brakes, 05 access start. Now back in our gateway installation list, we can do a couple of things. We can hit the start key right here, and that's going to scan all the modules and check all the faults. So when we look at that gateway installation list, it's telling us whether a fault exists or not. It's the gateway that's looking for those faults. When we click on starting the actual scan, now we're talking to the individual modules, each one at a time, rather than just the gateway to see if it sees any issues. Ideally, and almost every time, those two things match perfectly. I'm sure there's a case where you could have it where they won't match. This is also good because we actually extract more information from each module than just whether it has a fault or not. We can also save this, copy it, print it out. If we're dealing with a customer or something like that, we can have that on file so that we have their information saved. Also, if you get into a really weird issue and you want to get some help from Rostec, this is the kind of scan you're going to have to do. I would not recommend doing this on an 04, 5, 6, 7, 8 Touareg or Phaeton or probably an Audi A8. It will take like 100 hours. All right, so that's all done scanning. Now we have a little bit more information. We see all of the modules that it actually scanned. And in addition to just the generic list, we have our actual module breakdowns. So we can see our ECM information here, TCM, hardware number, coding, software level, all the good information. Once we do that, and once we have that information, we want to save it. You can save it as whatever you want. And typically this is stored under this PC, Windows, Rostec, VCDS, and logs. So pretty easy, pretty straightforward stuff. Let's go into the module and start digging around in a module and walk through that. We don't even have to back out and go to that main screen. If we double click the module, it'll bring us right there. It also will bring you directly to the fault code screen, which is totally fine. Right? Thankfully, we have no fault code stored here. Let's hit done, go back. Here's our main module screen. We have our main module information up here at the top. Now we have two different sections. We have basic functions and advanced functions. If you're only using the basic functions, this does not count on the VIN limited VCDS cables towards your number of VINs. It's only the advanced functions, so keep that in mind. So we talk about fault codes. That's pretty self-explanatory. If there were any faults stored in the system, we would be able to see that here. Click done, go back. Support codes is not available. Readiness, this is going to check our readiness status. Are all our monitors passed so that we can get a state inspection? I've cleared these since driving the car, so mine are not set. Our advanced ID gives us deep information about that module. So we can save this as well. It'll save it to that same log we already started. Advanced measured values. Stored in measured value blocks is the information the module sees. ECM is a great example because this is where we're going to look at RPM, speed, throttle, coolant temperature, air to intake temperature. All the things that the ECM sees, we can see in our measured value blocks. There are a couple of different protocols. We have our old protocol, which is just measured values. That was great because they were around forever, and a lot of us techs knew some of the numbers. We knew that 32 was fuel trim. We knew that 33 was oxygen sensor, and that was really great because we could access it super fast. The newer protocol in many modules is called UDS, and rather than having measured value block 32 say, we have these IDs. Look at this ID number here, IDE0011. We're still able to access and monitor this information. It's just labeled differently. The good thing is, at least on the factory scan tool side, is we actually started getting information about what these numbers were, but then it came along with a pain in the butt way to access them. So the big key here, if you want to find something, is to use the search box. You can scroll through all those values if you want, but I find that to be silly, and I like to just use the search. Another tip on the search, we have to be creative on how we search. If we're looking for RPM, say, we may not find it in that search box. We need to be thinking, what else would be called RPM? Maybe it's called engine speed rather than RPM. Maybe we call intake air temperature sensor IAT, but it may just call it intake temperature. Since we were talking about RPM, let's see what happens. So now we have crankshaft speed, camshaft speed, and misfires. Awesome. Let's see what happens when we type in engine speed. So here we have both of them. We have RPM and engine speed, and they'll probably give us the same value. So let's just for fun look at a couple of things. We have engine speed here, we have coolant temperature, we have vehicle speed, and we have, let's just click a couple of these. When I click them, you can see that it brings them over to here. Because our car's not running, we have no engine speed. 30 degrees Celsius coolant temperature because the car hasn't ran, it's been sitting. We're not driving, it hasn't started. And then our throttle position is 15.7%. Just for fun, let's see what happens when I push the throttle pedal. So there we go. We can look right at all of our information. If we were driving the car or had it running, we could monitor misfires. All this information right here is what we can look at. And there's so much stuff that we can see right here. Look at all this information, just for days and days. Now, not every module is going to have all this information that we can access. The ECM is one that we can access a lot, which is really, really cool. So let's say we wanted to prove out misfires like we did on that video where the piston was broken. We would add our misfire counter, and we can just add these here. Let the car run and see which cylinder is actually misfiring. We can also save this information to our log that we've already started. Now, one of the most amazing features of VCDS is our ability to graph this information. For things like misfires, we can see that pretty easily. If the number's moving, it's misfiring. But what about something like wheel speed from the ABS system? We may not be able to see tiny fluctuations in the number because